The night the stars fell. 20 years gone, and the cowboy still saw the fire in the sky, felt the ground shake, tasted the ash. He still heard the screams, a chorus of terror, but mostly he heard his own, a raw, desperate cry as his little sister's hand, so small and soft, slipped from his grasp. Gone. Just like the stars, like everything good. He'd never forgotten the scent of burning earth, the metallic tang of fear, or the hollow ache where her laughter used to be. Every night, the same damn dream. Every night, the same damn pain. Dust. Always dust. Caleb, the cowboy, squinted at the horizon, a familiar silhouette against the rising sun. His ranch, Lone Star, was more than just land. It was a stubborn memory, a testament to what he built from nothing after that night. He was mending a fence post, the rhythmic clang of hammer on wood a steady counterpoint to the chirping crickets, when a flicker of movement caught his eye. A lone rider, far off. Nothing unusual. Folks passed through all the time. But this rider wasn't moving with the easy gait of a weary traveler. This one was riding fast, hell-bent for leather, straight for his ranch. Caleb's hand instinctively went to the worn grip of his revolver, holstered at his hip. He'd seen enough trouble in his 40 years to know a prelude when he saw one. He watched, his breath steady, as the rider drew closer, the details sharpening. It was a woman, slight, yet riding like a demon. Her hair, the color of a raven's wing, whipped around her face. As she reined in her horse a few yards from him, the animal skidding to a halt in a cloud of dust, Caleb felt a prickle of unease. Her eyes, they were a startling, vibrant green, and held a depth that belied her youthful face. A face, he realized with a jolt that sent a tremor through his calloused hands, that hadn't aged a day since he last saw it. "Caleb," she said, her voice a soft murmur that cut through the morning silence like a whispered secret. "Is that really you?" He stared, dumbfounded, the world tilted on its axis. He knew that voice, that face, but it was impossible. He swallowed, the dust suddenly thick in his throat. "Who in tarnation are you?" He managed, his voice a low rumble. A faint, sad smile touched her lips. "It's me, Caleb. Lily." The hammer slipped from his grip, clattering to the dusty ground. Lily, his little sister. His mind screamed 1,000 objections, a whirlwind of disbelief and a desperate, fragile hope. She couldn't be. She was gone. He'd seen her, or what was left of her. But the way she looked at him, the way her eyes held that same spark he remembered. It was like staring into a ghost, a living, breathing ghost that had walked straight out of his most tormenting nightmares. The sun beat down, but Caleb felt a chill that went straight to his bones. This wasn't just a visitor. This was an earthquake. And he knew, with a certainty that made his stomach clench, that his quiet, predictable life had just shattered into a million pieces. Caleb stood rooted, the morning sun now a distant warmth. He watched Lily dismount, her movements fluid and unhurried. He wanted to shout, to demand answers, to shake her until the impossible lie crumbled. But the words caught in his throat, choked by a cocktail of disbelief and a flicker of raw, desperate hope. This couldn't be Lily. His Lily was gone, buried under a sky that had wept fire. "You're not real," he finally rasped, his voice hoarse. "You can't be." She took a step closer, her green eyes unwavering. "I am. I remember you, Caleb. The way you always smelled of leather and campfire smoke. The scar above your left eye from when you tried to wrestle that badger." A ghost of a smile touched her lips, a smile that twisted his gut. "And how you always hummed that off-key tune when you thought no one was listening." Each detail she spoke was a tiny shard of glass, cutting into the hardened shell he'd built around his grief. He remembered the badger, the tune. He remembered her laughter like wind chimes. But this was a trick. A cruel, elaborate trick. "Who sent you?" he demanded, his hand finally reaching for his revolver. "What do you want?" Her gaze softened, a hint of sorrow in its depths. No one sent me, Caleb. I don't want anything. I just ... I finally found my way back. Just then, a rider appeared on the ridge, silhouetted against the bright morning. A man, tall and lean with a long duster coat flapping in the wind. He rode a powerful black stallion, and his pace was steady, deliberate. He wasn't hurrying, but he was clearly heading this way. Lily's eyes flickered to the newcomer, a subtle shift in her expression that Caleb didn't miss. A flicker of something that looked like apprehension? "Who's that?" Caleb asked, his voice low. His eyes narrowed on the approaching rider. "No one important," Lily said, a little too quickly. "Just someone I met on the road." The man drew closer, his face obscured by the brim of his hat until he was just a few yards away. He dismounted with an easy grace, his movements practiced. He was older than Lily, perhaps in his late 30s, with a lean, weathered face and eyes that seemed to miss nothing. He offered a slight nod to Caleb, his gaze lingering on Lily for a moment longer than necessary. "Lily," the man said, his voice a smooth baritone, "are you quite finished with your reunion?" There was an edge to his tone, a subtle command that made Caleb bristle. Caleb stepped forward, placing himself between Lily and the stranger. "She's my sister. Who are you?" The man's lips curved into a faint, humorless smile. "Let's just say I'm an old friend and a protector." "She's been through a lot, Cowboy." His eyes, cold and assessing, met Caleb's. "More than you could ever imagine." Caleb felt a surge of protectiveness, a primal instinct he hadn't realized still existed within him. This stranger was a threat. He knew it. But to what? To Lily, or to the fragile sense of peace he painstakingly constructed? He looked at Lily, searching her eyes for an answer, a sign of what was truly going on. But her gaze was unreadable, distant. "She's coming with me," Caleb stated, his voice firm, leaving no room for argument. The stranger's smile widened, a hint of something predatory in it. "I don't think so, Cowboy. She has a choice. And I suspect, after all this time, she'll choose the path that offers her safety." He glanced at Lily again, a silent message passing between them. Caleb felt a cold dread settle in his stomach. He was losing control, not just of the situation, but of the narrative, of the truth itself. The stranger's presence was a wedge, driving itself between him and the ghost of his past, and Caleb knew, with a sickening certainty, that if he didn't act now, he'd lose her again. The stranger, who introduced himself only as Silas, stood by his horse, a silent, imposing figure. Lily hesitated, her gaze flitting between Silas and Caleb, a silent battle raging within her. Caleb watched, his heart a raw knot of conflicting emotions. He wanted to drag her away, to shake some sense into her, to demand she explain how she could be here, alive, unchanged. But a lifetime of contained emotion, of burying the pain, kept him rooted. "Lily," he finally said, his voice softer than he intended, "just tell me. How?" Her eyes, those same green eyes, filled with an ancient weariness. "It's a long story, Caleb, one I'm not sure you believe." "Try me," he retorted, a flash of the old fire returning to his gaze. He thought of the night, the screams, the sheer, overwhelming chaos. The air was thick with the scent of burning cedar and something acrid, metallic. Caleb, barely 10, clutched Lily's hand, her small fingers surprisingly firm in his. The sky was an inferno, not just stars, but streaks of raw, incandescent light tearing through the darkness. The ground bucked and roared like a wounded beast. He could hear his father yelling, his mother crying out. "Run, Caleb, run!" His father's voice, rough and desperate, cut through the din. He pulled Lily, stumbling through the chaos, the heat a suffocating blanket. He remembered the moment, vivid as a brand, a searing light, a deafening crack, and a force that ripped them apart. He remembered reaching, screaming her name as her hand, slick with dust and his own sweat, slipped away. He fell, hitting his head. The last thing he saw before darkness claimed him was a flash of green light, so brilliant it burned itself into his eyelids where Lily had been. He blinked, the harsh sunlight of the present bringing him back. The memory was as fresh as if it had happened yesterday, not 20 years ago. The pain, a dull throb in his chest, was just as real. He looked at Lily, so impossibly young, and the bitterness surged. "I remember the green light," he said, his voice flat. "The one that swallowed you whole." A flicker of surprise, then something akin to recognition, crossed Lily's face. "You saw it?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. Silas finally spoke, his voice low and calm. "There are things in this world, Cowboy, that defy explanation. Things that were here long before us and will be long after." He gestured vaguely to the north. "Things that awaken when the balance shifts." Caleb scoffed. "What balance? This ain't some campfire story, old man. This is my sister, or someone who looks just like her." "The stars that fell that night," Silas continued, ignoring Caleb's interruption, "weren't stars at all. They were fragments of something ancient, something powerful." He looked directly at Lily, and one of them, it found her. The words hung in the air, heavy with unspoken meaning. Caleb's mind reeled. Fragments? Ancient power? It sounded like lunacy. But then he looked at Lily again, at her ageless face, and the impossible started to feel chillingly plausible. "She needs protection," Silas said, his eyes returning to Caleb. "There are others who would seek what she has, what she is." "What she is." Caleb's voice was laced with anger and a growing dread. This was more than just a reunion. It was a prophecy of danger. Lily finally spoke, her voice strained. "He's right, Caleb. I'm not entirely human anymore." Her gaze dropped to her hands, small and delicate, yet with a strange, almost ethereal glow that Caleb hadn't noticed before. "I can do things I don't understand. Things that could hurt people." He looked at her, his little sister, his heart aching with a grief that had never truly healed. And now she was telling him she was a weapon, a danger. A choice formed in his mind, sharp and clear. Let her go with this mysterious stranger, who seemed to know more about her than he ever could, and perhaps keep her safe, even if it meant losing her again. Or keep her here, by his side, where he could protect her himself, even if he didn't understand what he was protecting her from. The ranch, once a sanctuary, now felt like a target. His heart screamed to pull her close, to never let her go. But his reason, the cold, pragmatic logic of a man who'd seen too much, whispered of the unknown dangers she carried. The choice gnawed at Caleb, reason or heart, safety in the unknown or danger in the familiar. He looked at Lily, then at Silas, who stood patient, his gaze unwavering. The sun was high now, beating down on the dusty ranch, amplifying the tension. "So," Caleb began, his voice flat, "you're telling me you're some kind of alien, and people want you because of it?" Lily nodded slowly, her eyes downcast. "Something like that. Silas says they're called collectors. They hunt people like me, people touched by the fragments." "And you expect me to believe this?" Caleb's voice was laced with sarcasm, but a tremor of fear ran beneath it. "You don't have to believe it, Caleb," Silas interjected, his voice calm, almost soothing. "Just accept that she needs protection beyond what this ranch can offer." He gestured around at the isolated homestead. "You're a good man, Cowboy, but you're out of your depth." The words struck a nerve. Caleb's jaw tightened. "I protected her once," he snarled, the memory of his failure a bitter taste in his mouth. "I lost her. I won't lose her again." A sudden, sharp crack echoed through the air. A bullet whizzed past Caleb's ear, kicking up dust inches from his boot. He spun, hand already on his revolver, scanning the horizon. Two riders, Then 3, then 5 emerged from the distant tree line, riding hard. They were heavily armed, their faces grim, their intent unmistakable. "Collectors," Silas stated, his voice devoid of surprise. "They found us, sooner than I expected." Caleb's blood ran cold. This was it. The confrontation he'd unknowingly prepared for 20 years. But he hadn't prepared for this. He pulled his revolver, his movements fluid and practiced. "Get behind me, Lily," he commanded, his voice a low growl. Lily didn't move. Instead, she looked at Silas. "We need to go, now." "Too late," Silas said, drawing a rifle from his saddle. "They're fast." The riders were closing in, their shouts growing louder. Caleb fired a warning shot, the roar of his revolver a stark contrast to the sudden silence that fell between the three of them. The lead rider, a large man with a scarred face, laughed. "Give us the girl, old man. No one gets hurt." "She's not going anywhere with you," Caleb yelled back, aiming carefully. He fired again, winging one of the riders. The man cried out, clutching his arm. The collectors returned fire, bullets ripping through the air, embedding themselves in the fence posts, kicking up more dust. Caleb ducked behind a water trough, reloading with practiced speed. Silas, surprisingly agile, returned fire with deadly accuracy, dropping one of the attackers. Lily, however, stood out in the open, her eyes closed, her hands outstretched. A strange humming sound began to emanate from her, growing in intensity. The air around her shimmered, a faint green light emanating from her fingertips. Caleb, catching a glimpse, felt a primal terror. This was the power Silas spoke of. This was the light that took her all those years ago. "Lily, no!" Caleb yelled, scrambling towards her, but it was too late. With a guttural scream, she unleashed a wave of pure, emerald energy. It ripped through the air, slamming into the approaching riders. Horses bucked, men cried out, thrown from their saddles as if by an unseen force. The scarred leader, caught in the blast, was lifted clean off his horse and slammed against a rock, lying still. The remaining collectors, stunned and terrified, hesitated. But more were coming. Caleb saw it, a fresh wave cresting the ridge. He looked at Lily, trembling, exhausted, the green light fading around her. He had seen the power, the destructive force she wielded. And in that moment, as the sun beat down on the ravaged land and the cries of the wounded echoed, Caleb knew something profound. He couldn't protect her from herself. He couldn't control this. He had lost control, completely. The air hung heavy with the smell of ozone and fear. The collectors, those who could still move, were retreating, a scattering of dark figures disappearing over the ridge. Caleb stood over the unconscious, scarred leader, his chest heaving. Lily, drained and trembling, had collapsed to her knees, her face ashen. Silas, remarkably calm, walked over to her, offering a hand. Caleb watched them, a profound weariness settling over him. He felt an ache in his chest, not from physical injury, but from the raw wound of understanding. His sister, the one he mourned, the one he swore to protect, was a force of nature, a weapon. And he was just a cowboy with a gun. "She's too powerful," he rasped, his voice raw. "Too dangerous." Silas turned, his eyes holding a depth Caleb hadn't noticed before. "Not dangerous, untamed, like a storm. You can't stop it, but you can learn to ride it," Caleb snorted. "And you're the one who teaches her to ride it?" "I've been trying," Silas said simply, "for 20 years. She's drawn to you, Caleb. She remembers you. That's why she came here." The words hit Caleb like a punch. All this time, he'd been chasing a ghost, and the ghost had been chasing him. The silence that followed was broken only by the distant whinny of a horse and the mournful creak of the windmill. He looked at Lily, his little sister, still fragile, still lost in some way. But now, he saw not just the child he lost, but the power she contained, a power that could both destroy and protect. He walked over to her, kneeling beside her. Her eyes fluttered open, filled with a mixture of fear and sorrow. "Caleb," she whispered, her voice barely a breath. "I didn't mean to." "I know," he said, taking her hand. It felt delicate, but he no longer felt the illusion of fragility. He felt the hum of something vast and ancient beneath her skin. He looked at her closely. Her skin, even after the fight, was unblemished, her eyes clear. The same eyes he remembered from that night, the night the stars fell. He remembered a small wooden bird carved for her by their father, a simple toy that brought her immense joy. It was lost that night, swallowed by the fire and dust. He'd searched for it for weeks, a futile attempt to cling to a piece of her. Now, standing here, he realized something. The fire, the screams, the slipping hand, it wasn't the end. It was the beginning of her transformation. That green light wasn't destruction. It was something else. A cocoon. "There's more of them," Silas said, interrupting Caleb's thoughts. "More collectors. They'll be back, and they'll bring more." Caleb looked at the ravaged land around his ranch, at the faint smoke still rising from a splintered fence post. His home, his sanctuary, was no longer safe. It was a beacon, attracting danger. He could send Lily away with Silas, trust this stranger, who, despite his enigmatic ways, seemed to genuinely care for her. Or he could stay, fight for her, and likely die, taking his ranch with him. A memory flashed. His father, standing tall against a charging bull, a look of grim determination on his face. "Sometimes, son," he'd said, "you gotta walk into the fire if you want to save what you love." Caleb stood, his gaze sweeping the horizon, then settling on Lily. He had lost her once. He wasn't about to lose her to a choice he made out of fear. There was only one path for him. He wouldn't just send her away. He'd go with her. He'd face whatever darkness awaited them, armed with nothing but his resolve and the faint, fragile hope that he could still protect his little sister, even if she wasn't so little anymore. The silence settled again, but this time it was filled not with despair, but with the quiet hum of a decision made, a new purpose forged in the crucible of his past. The journey was a blur of dusty roads, hidden trails, and hushed conversations under a sky that seemed too vast, too indifferent. Caleb rode alongside Lily and Silas, his senses heightened, his old cowboy instincts sharpened by a constant awareness of lurking danger. He learned about the fragments, ancient, sentient energies that crash-landed millennia ago, imbuing certain individuals with incredible, often destructive, abilities. Lily, he discovered, was a rare case, a direct conduit to a powerful fragment, her powers still raw and untamed. Silas, it turned out, was a keeper, one of a secretive order sworn to protect those like Lily and guide them. They found themselves in a hidden valley, nestled deep within a seemingly impenetrable mountain range. The air here was thin, crisp, and charged with an almost tangible energy. This was where Silas brought others like Lily, a sanctuary where they could learn to control their powers. But the collectors had followed. The final confrontation was brutal. A small army of collectors, led by a ruthless woman with eyes as cold as chipped ice, descended upon the valley. Caleb fought with a desperate ferocity he hadn't known he possessed, his revolver a blur of motion, his body a shield for Lily. Silas, with his quiet strength, proved to be a formidable warrior, deflecting energy blasts and disarming attackers with surprising speed. But it was Lily who truly turned the tide. She stood amidst the chaos, her emerald eyes blazing, the green light surrounding her now a controlled, majestic aura. She wasn't just deflecting attacks. She was weaving the energy, creating shields that shimmered and pulsed, then unleashing focused beams that incapacitated her enemies without killing them. Caleb watched, awestruck, as his little sister, the girl he mourned, became a force of nature, a beacon of raw power and focused intent. He felt a surge of pride, a strange mix of fear and admiration. The fight ended as suddenly as it began. The collectors, broken and defeated, retreated into the mountains, their leader carried away, battered but alive. The valley was silent, save for the labored breaths of the survivors. Caleb looked at Lily, who stood tall, her eyes still glowing faintly. She had changed. The child was gone, replaced by something ancient and powerful, yet still undeniably her. "You did it, Lily," he said, his voice thick with emotion. She turned to him, a faint, tired smile touching her lips. "We did it, Caleb." He stayed for a time in the valley, watching Lily train, learning to channel her power, to embrace what she had become. He saw her laugh, a sound that finally brought peace to the raw wound in his heart. He saw her grow, not in age, but in understanding and strength. One morning he stood at the edge of the valley, looking out at the world beyond. His ranch was gone, his old life a distant echo. He was no longer just a cowboy. He was a silent guardian, a brother to a star child. He knew the collectors would return, that this peace was fleeting. But he also knew that Lily was ready. And he, somehow, was ready too. He looked back at the valley, at Lily, bathed in the soft morning light, practicing her power with a serene focus. He would ride on, a lone wolf on the plains, but now with a purpose beyond his own survival. He would watch, he would wait, and when the time came, he would be there. The wind whispered across the plains, a lonely, ancient song. Caleb adjusted his hat, his eyes scanning the horizon. He might have lost his sister that night the stars fell, but he'd found something far more extraordinary. And as he spurred his horse forward, leaving the valley behind, he knew one thing with a certainty that settled deep in his bones. The stars do not fall, son. They just find a new place to shine.